Just because we're on high vis orange, high vis yellow, doesn't mean that we don't still carry that emotional pain and burden around with us.
When we lost our son-in-law to suicide, it was brought into really sharp focus.
We're raising awareness, but we still have people really, really struggling. Now what?
Hello, welcome to this Beyond the Build series episode brought to you by CITB. Today we're going to have the big conversation about mental health and suicide in construction, an industry that's known for its toughness. Actually, we need to break some of those boundaries and have a discussion around what we can do to move things forward when we're talking about these big subjects of mental health and suicide. I'm very, very lucky to have with me Sam Downie, CEO from Mates in Mind. Thank you for joining us, Sam. And Mick Shaw, who is one of the founders of the Silent Voices Construction charity. Welcome to both of you, and thanks ever so much for being with us today. I want to start us off today by just letting you know why I wanted to do this particular podcast. We're looking to do a series of podcasts at CITB, and there are lots of subjects we could have tackled. And mental health and suicide in construction, really, really important, as you both know. I don't need to tell you that. And it's something that's been on my agenda for a long time and on CITB's agenda for a long time. But it was brought into really sharp focus for me earlier this year when we lost our son-in-law to suicide. And I posted something on LinkedIn about it because Andy, my son-in-law, his wife wanted me to do that. She wanted people to know Andy's story. She wanted people to be able to share his experience and perhaps chat with her about the experiences that she was having. And I got so many inboxes and messages about that from such a wide range of people. It just really, really brought to my attention how critical this is in our industry. So the first thing I want to ask both of you really, and we'll start with you, Sam, if that's okay, is what makes you so keen to work in this sphere? What triggered you to want to work in mental health, and not necessarily particularly in construction, but just in that mental health world?
Well, first, I'm sorry for your experience and your family's loss. And I think we all know what it's like to struggle, both ourselves and others. And my working life has been around working with people that are struggling, helping them to make positive change and helping them to have access to what we know are effective interventions. And throughout that time, I've worked in a variety of settings, but that's always been core to it. And I think what really drew me into this role and what I love about it is that I have family background in construction. I have a real appreciation of the environment in which we live our lives, and an admiration for that work, I think. And I also have family background of suicide, and so I have that sort of sense of, I think, both the sort of wonderfulness of the sector, but also I have a sense of how when things go wrong in people's lives and we struggle, that struggle can really permeate through not just the individual, the family, their community, but it really ripples on. And I think we have shared responsibility to find ways to make positive change. And I am lucky enough to be in a job that allows me to do that for my career as well as sort of generally in life.
And you've been lucky enough to have a career of that, and that's fantastic. Yeah. And Mick, your story is probably a little bit different, I'm suspecting. What made you found Silent Voices? What was the trigger for that?
Well, basically, many years ago, unfortunately, I had a nasty accident when I was working in the construction sector. Because of that accident, it impacted my life, my wife's life, my children's life immeasurably. I was out of work for 7.5 years because I had an accident at work. At my lowest, I could have potentially been one of these horrific statistics, these horrific numbers, sadly, like Andy. And there's so many of us out there which are close. And when I managed to get my voice back, when I managed to get back on track, my life back on track, I realised I can't allow this to keep on happening without me doing my absolute utmost to try and stop it. So that's where we sort of sit and fit with Silent Voices. We are not as professional as Mates in Mind. We are 3 guys, 3 co-founders, which one of us is a safety coach, one of us is a storeman, and one of us is a sparky. But by God, we really care and we need to create change. We also think we've got the ideas and the resources to really impact that change. We're doing it on a very, very small level at the minute. But from what we can see, and I'll tell you the biggest factor, what I can see and why I think Silent Voices will succeed, is because the boots on the ground are ready to listen to it. 15 years ago, I would have kicked my own ass out of the building sites, and we haven't got time for this. Whereas now, these great men and women are ready to listen. We need change, we want change, and that's what Silent Voice is here to try and bring.
Brilliant.
So that's my reasoning.
Two very different organisations, but with the same ultimate aim to protect the people in our industry. And Sam, what do you think creates this vulnerability in construction, which makes its people so very susceptible to mental health? Or is there something in construction, or is it something else that we're missing?
So I think we definitely recognise that construction is what we describe as a higher risk sector, and it's one of several sectors, sadly, in which people are more likely to struggle with their mental health and in which the suicide rate is higher. And we were founded to work in construction, and that's our core, and it's that learning that we've then been asked by other sectors to go and help from. So that's our sort of home and our understanding. And I think what we understand, and we're doing research at the moment with Warwick, the consultation from CLC has just launched to try and really get those findings out and to think about what measures we can put in place to address those underlying causes, is that there are factors in how construction is contracted and organised that makes it very tough for workers, particularly workers with vulnerability already. So we think about things about the inflexibility of work, the hours, the location, the pressures within projects, and just the ways in which the contracting means that pressure comes down through the supply chain to those at the end who we know are most at risk. That we know also that the large organisations often do have a lot of support in place, but actually in construction, many of the workforce are not in those large organisations and don't have access to those support services. We also, of course, know that people often don't feel able to identify when they're struggling, or don't feel able to speak up, or don't want to access the support that's there. So there's that whole part of the jigsaw that we, I think, are thinking about organisations really getting in there and changing some of that. And then we need to think about the way in which people experience being within the organisation that they're in, whether they're directly employed or whether they're through an extended contract, whether they're out on their own doing a solo job. And particularly then we're thinking about things like the impact of instability in pay, so not being confident that you're going to get paid, or the amount that you contracted, or when, and what that does to people in terms of how vulnerable they then feel. But also thinking about the aspects around feeling included and seen and known. So we know that even if you are working in part of a project, you might not feel connected to the people around you, or known by the people you're working with, or really even interacted with, except when perhaps it's a correction or being picked up on something. So something about how people start to feel part of that community. And I think people often talk about that as both a positive. So when people speak very highly of their experience of working in construction, which many people do, they often reference that sense of being part of something bigger and amazing. And it's about, well, how do we make sure that everyone has that experience of feeling seen and known and included and respected? So they, I think, are the factors that we're talking about. And then we know things like there's a very high level of neurodiversity within construction. We don't have a particularly diverse workforce. What does that mean if you're in one of those groups that don't feel like the norm? What's that sort of impact for you? So we've got those other factors we need to then think about too.
Absolutely. Lots to unpick there. And all very interested, and you will recognise most of that,
100%.
having worked on so many different operations, sites and projects.
100%.
What I wanted to ask you though, Mick, is how do we move this narrative from toughen up, which is our message, unfortunately, in the industry. It's always about toughen up, get a grip. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
To actually, no, speak up. Speak up if you're struggling. Say what you think, say what you mean. How do we move that narrative? What's your experience of that?
It's really hard. It's really hard because that's been ingrained in us for such a long time. But I think what's happening in our industry is we're realising actually people do suffer. You know, every single one of us talking around this table now knows sometimes, just sometimes, life can be absolutely brutal. Yeah. We know that, we feel it. In construction, we feel it just the same. Just because we're on high-vis orange, high-vis yellow, doesn't mean that we don't still carry that emotional pain and burden around with us. Now, what we're trying to explain is some of these people work 50, 60 hours a week with each other, over 48 weeks a year. We could go to Ireland, Scotland, Wales, London, Manchester. So, I know you off that job. I know you off that job. We intrinsically know each other, but we are scared to show we care. We are really scared to show we care. If we can buy in to get everybody to say, look, we really need to look after each other while we're building all this world-class stuff. We really need to look after each other because this is what's happening. And we all know, we feel it, we see it, we know people what it's happened to. If we can get us to just unshackle what we need to, that will start driving these numbers down immediately. It's multifaceted with lots and lots of different nuances, what we have to do. Sam's already touched on some of them with the finances, with the working away, with the night shift work, with the every topping out party. You're celebrating that tomorrow you ain't got a job. Yeah. It's brutal. Yeah. So we really need to get a grip, and from so many areas and so many levels. But the main level is to the men and women what are doing the excellent job, saying, look, please, please speak to us, speak to your friends, speak to anyone. There's help there and you need to do it. And we're getting better at it. You know, credit where credit's due, we are getting better at it. So that's good news.
So with all that in mind, Sam, how easy or difficult has it been to reach the full spectrum of the industry? You know, we have such a diversity of companies, from the big tier ones right through to self-employed people doing domestic refurb. How is that awareness raising going? How do you do it? How do you really get a grip of it?
I think it's a really big challenge, isn't it? And we know that because we know that we're not seeing the change that we want to see effect. And I think that's in part why so many organisations are coming into the sector, because they want to help and they have good intent. But what gives me confidence and hope is that we initially set out to raise awareness, and the recent CIOB research report showed that awareness raising activities had gone from something like 20% in 2020 to 77% in this year. Which is a huge increase, and it suggests that the people responding had access to that sort of information. So the question then is, so what good is that doing? We've managed to raise awareness, now what? And in the same piece of research, there was a similar increase in people that had gone, that were thinking about suicide often, and that meant sort of daily or weekly, and that was from about 2% to 9%, so nearly 10% of people, which is a really high figure, isn't it? It's really concerning.
Scary.
So you think we're raising awareness, but we still have people really, really struggling. What does that mean? And I think what that means is that we need to learn from what we've done and what has worked, and we then need to see how we're going to make the next change. And for us, that's a three-parter, really. We have 10 core standards and we start with an assessment. But in many ways, I don't think it matters how you describe it. What matters is that what you're doing is effective. And so the first part for us is about organisations right through, and that means of any scale, right through to an individual on their own, has access to the information needed, and so is working from an informed approach with systems and processes, routines if you're just on your own, and has access to the information they need when they need it, so that they really embed good mental health practice as part of their day-to-day working, the same way you have to manage physical safety. The second part for us is that piece beyond awareness raising. So that really is about educating. So helping people feel their feelings, name them, speak them, and speak them to a colleague or somebody in their community or a manager or somebody at home, what their feeling is and what's going on for them. And also to be confident to do that, not just about physical feeling, mental health, emotions, but also physical feelings, because quite a lot of us actually, our emotions come out of us physically. So you need to be able to make that link and name both. And we know the same group are actually notoriously bad at going to the doctor for physical health concerns. We've got to think about both things together. And then making sure that when people do name their feelings and talk about struggling, they do it into an environment that responds positively. Doesn't think it has to fix it, can signpost to resources and knows where they are. And that's right through from big organisations to individuals having information. And then the third part for us is about knowing that what we're doing is effective, whoever it is that's doing it. And that's critical, because so often interventions are well-intentioned, but they're not necessarily effective. And I think coming from a background in the charity sector, I believe that we have a responsibility to use charitable income effectively and efficiently. I think we're tasked to do that. And that to me means that we should be thinking about, should it be us or should it be another organisation? Can we collaborate? Should we be doing this in partnership? How do we make best use of that responsibility we have with those funds? And then the other part, I think, of your question, which is around how do we reach right across the spectrum of how people are working. And for us, that's still a work in progress. We've managed to think about ways to work with large and medium and small organisations. And we have some really great organisations sponsoring right through their supply chains into that extended supply chain. So I think that's really positive, because it means we can reach individuals that we wouldn't have reached before. And then we also have organisations like CITB who are sponsoring us to work with small organisations, micros, that are taking apprentices, and to work with apprentices in colleges. So we're trying to get that cohort coming into the sector to be better prepared and to kind of spread the word. So they're becoming change agents in and of themselves. But we know we also have people out there who aren't going to come into contact with those interventions that we've put through. So for us, then it's about thinking, well, what else can we do? And that's been about, can we invite people in to connect with services we're already providing? Would people welcome others in? And I think that's a possibility. But then how can we roll out beyond that? And for us, that's about working in partnership with organisations. So that's some of the work we're looking at doing, including Lighthouse, who traditionally, I think, Mates in Mind have been seen as a bit of an either or to Lighthouse, but actually we see it very much as a both and, because we're there to do different jobs. We're there to provide a sort of proactive, preventative approach. Lighthouse is there to provide a reactive, responsive safety net. So we're thinking about what else can we do in terms of making those connections so that we can reach more people together.
And that was one of the things I wanted to pick up on with both of you, about the number of interventionist organisations that there are at the moment, which is great. It's absolutely a positive, but are we diluting the impact by having so many different organisations? And you've already touched on working in partnership, doing some collaborative thinking around proactive, reactive, and capturing. How would you, either one of you, how would you see that working if you were to work with other organisations to maximise and increase your impact? Particularly for you, Mick, with a very small charity, very new, still finding feet.
Absolutely.
How would you benefit from working with other charities like Mates in Mind?
Yeah, I think there could be a huge benefit on both sides, because obviously Silent Voices is a very small charity, and we do need to learn from people what have been doing it for much longer. So I think there could be a huge benefit. But if I may just revert briefly back to that previous question, when we was talking about how we're going to do it to get everybody involved in construction, how we can get that message out there. Silent Voices has got three different prongs where we need to attack this, and they're going to be UK wide. what I'm not able to fully divulge here at this table is how we're going to do it, but it's going to be happening, it's going to happen soon, and it's going to not only bring everybody in construction into the fold, it's also got to explain what's going on in construction to the rest of the United Kingdom. And I think that's so imperative that we do that, because by doing that, what we're going to be able to bring back to construction, and by God, these men and women deserve it, is pride. Because we need to get pride back into our industry, because so often when I'm out on sites, and I fall foul of it myself, when we're out on sites, the amount of times I say to them, what do you do? And I say, we've got to adjust the culture in construction. Before we tell what job we do, we put adjuster in front of it. I don't know, I'm just a roller driver, I'm just a traffic marshal, I'm just a chippy, I'm just a storeman. And by doing that, we're already decreasing the level of our worth. Not realising it. I can remember many years ago, I got told off at school, and the teacher said to me, you carry on like that, you're going to end up on a construction site. What is wrong on being on a construction site? There's absolutely nothing, but this all plays into our psyche very softly, but very consistently. And that's these long-term messages, what we need to get out. And we need to push much more positive messages about the way construction, about our construction men, about our construction women, because there is definitely not a juster out of anybody. You know, the work they do is world-class. And I think we need to really elevate, because we're very good, again, in construction at suppressing. We push down, push down, push down. And it all combines into this 507 eventually, 2 a day, whichever the horrific number is. We can see the problem, we can see the solution. We've just got to all push together for the solution. And that's why I think collaboratively, if I can get my words out, it would work marvellous. Do you know what I mean? Because there's enough room for people who's all got the same agenda, which is to look after people, to work together in my mind.
That's really interesting. And that piece about the profile of the industry and how people view the industry, and how, particularly how educationalists view the industry. And you can't do anything else. You can go into construction, which is absolutely wrong. We know that there are so many skilled, talented, professional, technical, genius people working in this industry.
Best problem solvers in the world.
But I didn't think about it in the context of mental health. But you are absolutely spot on, Mick. It's a really insightful view, that really interesting. Can I ask both of you, is there an intervention that you've seen or come across that you've thought, actually, if we could replicate that everywhere, it would solve a huge problem? Is there something? There may not be, but is there anything you've seen on site or in another industry? Because I know, Sam, you work across multiple industries.
I think I've seen 3 things. One is creating inclusive cultures, and one of the places that I think that has done that really well is the Tideway project. So they created something called Tideway Tribes, where they connected people together that had commonality of experience beyond their role. So it wasn't hierarchical, it was about a commonality of something they were experiencing. And I'm not sure if it actually came together through COVID or if it survived through COVID. I'd need to check with them. But it's really stayed with me as a way to connect within your workforce so that you create community. And it was really apparent to me because I went last week to one of their annual celebrations, just on from Blackfriars, and it was amazing. There were people that had been on that project for years. They greeted each other warmly, and there was immense pride in that work. And so there should be. I mean, it's an absolutely huge achievement, isn't it? What a great project to be part of. So I think that's one approach. Another approach is where there have been interventions that have been about paying people on time, fairly, and people can feel a level of confidence in that pay. So I think those approaches that look at paying people right through the work project are effective. And then I think the third one is where we've seen organisations that from the moment they interact with the person, and again, I'm talking about still about supply chain type projects, because that's where we've done so much of our work, and I think we do need to challenge ourselves to how do we go beyond that. And that to me is probably apprentices, and college, but is about where organisations have treated anyone coming into a project as though they were an employee and have given them training and access to resources from the moment they're engaged on that project. So they've extended that offer. And I think that changes things, both because it gives people a sense of feeling valued and a safety net, so you create that sort of sense of community and inclusion, but also because it means that many more people are getting access to those interventions than would otherwise have them. So they're my 3 things that I've seen work and I'd like to see extended.
Yeah. And Mick, is there anything you've seen that you...
I've only got 2 things, what I'd say. I can't think of 3 like Sam, but I've got 2.
It's not a competition.
Yeah, thank God.
No pressure here.
Now, the 2 things what I would really like to say, one would be from right at the top, the principal contractors, they get these amazing jobs, Thames Tidal Wages being one, and so on and so forth. They get these jobs and then they pass down to smaller contractors. When we get these jobs, when these PCs get these jobs, what I would love to, I'll just explain why first. When I was on the tools, one of the first questions what I would ask somebody on that job this time of year in September, will we get the turkey out of that? Will we be here at Christmas? It's an important question, okay? I'll ask it softly. I'll ask it to someone who I know. Got to get the turkey out of this. Oh, I don't know. All right, okay. The first time I go back home, if I'm away for the week, wife say, oh, how's the new job, blah, blah, blah. Oh, how long you got there? So can you see how important that question is? Yeah. For me, for my family back home who I'm working for, how important that question is. It's absolutely safety. I think if these principal contractors could tell me on induction day, when I turn up to their superb site and they tell me all this great stuff and this and the ethics and the ethos, they say, as long as you turn up on time, you don't turn up full of drugs, you don't turn up full of drink, you work safely and you work well, we can't tell you how long you're going to be here. But what we can do, we can tell you we will give you maybe a week, 10 days notice before we lay you off. That man or that woman's got to go home on that weekend, take the shoes off. I don't know how long I'm going to be there, but as long as I work well, as long as I work safely, I've got 10 days notice. You're relaxed. Can you see that 10 days makes such a big difference? And it really shouldn't,
no,
should
10
it?
days shouldn't make such a difference. If suddenly my terms and conditions change to 10 days notice, I'd be looking for another job.
Whereas us,
without hesitation,
we would take that as a real, I've got 10 days notice before, and we can do this. We're so clever. We can do it if we so wish. And that would be a massive change. What I would love to see brought in, that again would drive this number down. That again would make mental health so much easier for families and the construction workers. The second thing, and I'm going to be blowing Silent Voices trumpet a little bit now, but I do know it works, is on board in induction, have a suicide awareness and suicide prevention talk. Let's not sweep it under the carpet like so many other PCs and tier ones are doing. Let's expose this dirty thing and say, this is what's happening to us guys and girls right here, right now, right today. This is what we can do about it. These are the people what we can reach out and speak to about it. And therefore, what we're doing, we're gaining confidence and we're gaining traction. And you can also see that you're working for a responsible employer what actually cares. It also means that Silent Voices is going to be there on day one. Day one's a good day. You've just been employed, you're starting a new career, you're full of excitement. But then when you have them not such good days, hopefully they'll turn on Silent Voices and they say, let's see what these fellows are made of then, and we'll be there for them. So bring us in on good days so that we're there for the bad days. They're my 2 takeaways.
Brilliant. They're great. Fantastic. Okay, so just thinking ahead, what does success look like in 5 or 10 years' time? What would the industry look and feel like to you? Sam, I'll come to you first.
Well, I think the first thing is we'd see the figures come down, and we all know that's what we're looking for. But I think what I would look for is a change in feel. So we've talked about pride. And I think for me, it's that for the majority of us, work is good for our mental health. It gives us a sense of identity. It gives us a sense of purpose. It gives us security, financial. And in higher risk sectors, in construction, work is not good for workers' mental health. Many thrive, but many really don't. And so what I want to see is a culture change where we day to day create an environment in which people come into work, are themselves, can talk about how they are feeling, are encouraged to do so, are encouraged to bring their whole self and their energy and contribute fully, and then go home and be present at home too, in whatever way that is. And I think that requires us all behaving differently. Those outside construction need to value it openly, and we need to get change at the top from things like the joint code of practice that we're trying to get through, and implementation of things like the suicide prevention standard. We need to change how organisations are working so that everyone in that environment, particularly leadership, models good emotional literacy and authenticity and respect for one another. So that's the change I want to see, so that work is good for workers' mental health. And one of the ways that we are trying to do that at the moment is to create a network of change agents. So we know that many people trained as mental health first aiders and are out there, but they're not going to be effective alone. They need support, they need connection, they need their own community. They perhaps need to connecting to mental health first aiders beyond construction. So part of what we're trying to do is to create a network of change agents that goes beyond just one sector, anchors into the community, becomes self-sustaining, and starts to get this shift that we're looking for. So that's what we're about doing. I'd like to see that embedded, thriving, become self-sustaining, and construction becomes somewhere that people are proud to enter, benefit from being within, and go on to have long careers that they get to drive past those buildings and say, I built that, which I think is what many people's experience is.
I think it's why people come into the industry. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. And Mick, for you?
I mean, I have to agree with an awful lot of what Sam said. And yeah, the change what I'd like to really see in the next 5 years is obviously this horrible number being driven down massively. What excites me, and I've already touched on it before at the start of this, is the experts, which is the boots on the ground, are ready for change. And that is a massive sway in the culture. That's a huge sway in the culture. We can't underestimate the power of that. That is massive. So now they're ready, it will be a shame on everybody who are deemed to be in the management and the senior positions if they don't act on this now. Because we down here are ready. We want change. We need change. We're crying out for change. And let's not have it right. These numbers affect everybody on every single level. So it's not just this section or this section or this section what's being affected. It is construction. So now that we're ready for change, please, 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 let's just start enforcing it, getting this brickwork done further up the table so we can drive this down. And like you said, we can get pride and we can get construction to where it should be, because it's a cracking industry. It really is. I know we're here speaking about a very negative and a very sad sort of subject, but construction on a whole is a brilliant industry with amazing men in it, amazing women in it. You know, we've just got to remember that when we're not in that high-vis yellow, that high-vis orange, we're dads, we're brothers, we're sons, we're wives, we're aunties, we're sisters, we're normal people in a tough, tough industry. Let's maybe start showing each other the love and being a bit more confident to look after each other. That's what I'd love to see in the next 5 years.
Brilliant. And that's a lovely line for us to end on. So I will bring this to a close, and I will say thank you very much to Sam Downie from Mates in Mind and Mick Shaw from Silent Voices. Let's keep the conversation going, because this is not something that is going away. We all need to step up and support each other. And until the next time, be kind to each other, stay connected with each other, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.